two European Union diplomats. And today we are going to be talking about why Burkina Faso just expelled two European Union diplomats. Because when you see the headline and you don't have the context, ladies and gentlemen, it's how it always end up in a propaganda. But we are going to explain to you why Burkina Faso have just expelled two European Union diplomats just some days after breaking all diplomatic tie with France. Is this a beautiful move? Does it reinforce sovereignty? We're going to break this down. So, family, the action was taken on Tuesday, July 15, 2026. The Burkinabe government officially declared two European Union diplomats personnel non grata and ordered them to leave the country within 72 hours. Now, the deputy head of the European Union delegation in Ouagadougou, who also served as head of the political press and information department, families, has now been given 72 hours to leave Burkina Faso. He is the first European Union representative on the ground in Ouagadougou. And the second man that have been told to leave Ouagadougou within 72 hours is the European Union officer, all right? They call him the program officer responsible for the European Union program in Burkina Faso. Now, the announcement came via the state-owned news agency AIB. No specific reason were given, all right, for this particular expulsion, but the context makes the, motivation clear. Remember that when Burkina Faso declared that the French diplomats should leave and, they broke all diplomatic tie with France, they equally. Now, before all this started, it all started in the European Union Parliament when, the French representative, who happened to be a French DGSE and former military personnel of France, a general, who made that statement, that very, very grotesque pronunciation against Burkina Faso. But where Burkina Faso has problem with the European Union, you see, when that general who was representing France in the European Union made that statement, the fate of France was already sealed, all right? But where the European Union got into the crossfire, ladies and gentlemen, was because they now had a voting at the European Union Parliament who, by all practical measure, has no way of enforcing any type of resolution that they always come with in the European Union Parliament. European Union has no military, they have no Interpol, they have no military arm that is going to help them to enforce any resolution they always come up with in the European Union, Parliament, right? So where they got caught was to come up with a resolution where majority had to vote in favor, all right, of what the French general said. So this is some sort of kabuki theater. So now the question is, when they made this vote, what happened? Ladies and gentlemen, okay, I vote, okay, what happened? Burkina Faso broke all diplomatic ties with France. The AES left the ICC. Now they're telling the European Union representative, get out of Burkina Faso within 72 hours. That is what persona non grata means. That means after 72 hours, if your bags are still found in Burkina Faso, that bag is already contraband, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is the reason why the European Union is being expelled, their diplomats, even if the reasons were not stated. But in the coming days, we will be seeing all of that. Now, according to information, this is not isolated. It is the latest escalation in the pattern that has been building for over 3 years. Now, let me give you, the build up. All right. They reported that in June 2026, the European Union ambassador to Burkina Faso, Philippe Bruchain, was summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ouagadougou, formally protested a European Union resolution condemning alleged human rights violation by Burkinabe authorities. You already know what time it is with that type of allegation, right? The Traore government called it unacceptable interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand something at this point. This is a contest for sovereignty. This is a contest for who tells your story. All right? BBC tells story of what? The British. Al Jazeera tells story of the Qataris. CNN tells American story. Fox Post tells American story. But ladies and gentlemen, the $1 billion question we should ask now, who tells your story? So this is where this contest gets interesting. Burkina Faso is saying, you don't tell our story because you don't have to live in our reality. If you don't have to walk in my shoes, don't say anything about me. Don't tell me what my shoes look like if you don't have to walk in my shoes. So, and all these things now, because we have to go down to why the European Union had so much effrontery, so much fortitude and temerity to make this type of statement without any investigation, without any evidence, and to even, vote in this manner. About you are voting on another issue that concerns a different sovereign state that does not even exist in the European Union continental land surface. That is bad, ladies and gentlemen. Would they vote on China? Would they vote on, the United States? Would they vote on North Korea? Have they passed any vote on Japan? So when you look at these things, Africans need to start honing their narrative. They need to start putting themselves in a different atmosphere entirely. And that's what Burkina Faso is doing. Burkina Faso is pulling themselves not just out of ECOWAS and the African Union. Burkina Faso is trying to tell the world, look, you see, you can deal with every other person the way you want to deal with them, but when you want to deal with us, you have to show some respect. We don't even want you to talk about us. A lot of people don't understand what is going on. If you understand, you are going to appreciate this move by Burkina Faso. It is not just about the move. It is about the brain behind the move. It is about the intent behind the expulsion of the European Union, representative in Burkina Faso. It is an African country literally saying, we are not just sovereign, we control whatever, wherever, as long as it exists within the circumference of Burkina Faso. Now, according to information, after this European diplomat was invited by the foreign ministry of Burkina Faso, he was condemned by the Burkinabe foreign minister, who said that was utterly disrespectful, it was unacceptable, and it was an unacceptable interference in internal state affairs of a sovereign state. Now, that summoning was a short warning to the European Union. Did they receive it? We don't know. Now, Burkina Faso is saying we are past those states that will call you to warn you. Because if I call you to warn you, sometimes you might think it's a threat, and I'm playing with it. Now, Burkina Faso have expelled the European Union representative in Ouagadougou to send a message that we did not just call you to warn you. Now we are taking the step to enforce our position that we don't tolerate no nonsense. Now, you see, in January, this is not the first time Burkina Faso is taking this type of action. In January 2023, Burkina Faso expelled French Ambassador Luc Alade, declared him persona non grata, and expelled him within 72 hours. April 2024, 3 French diplomats were expelled for subversive activities inside Burkina Faso. And within 72 hours, they were told to leave the country, which they left. In August 2025, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Carol Flor Schmozniak, declared persona non grata over a United Nations Security Council report on children and armed conflicts. Who made that resolution? It was France at the time. But Carol Flor Schmozniak was expelled because she compiled the report. All right? She compiled the report and she was expelled. Now, in June 2022, in June 2026, 22nd, the European Union ambassador Brochain was summoned and formally protested. Now, in June 26, 2026, Burkina Faso severed all ties with France. In July 15, 2026, two European Union diplomats were expelled in Burkina Faso. Now, the trajectory is unmistakable because Ouagadougou is systematically removing Western diplomatic figures it perceives as operating with a mandate of oversight rather than partnership. Because come to think of it, you are the European Union diplomat, whatever you are in Burkina Faso. Your business is to do consular surveys and make sure that some of the European living in Burkina Faso, if there are any of them, they are living fine, and if they have any issues, maybe resolving, visa issues and consular service, you can make sure that these things work fine. But now, when you start meddling in state affairs, you've gone beyond your boundary. So, the billion-dollar question everybody should answer right now is: Burkina Faso justified to send these elements out? Now, we have to go to the benefits because it has benefits and it has downside. Every time you make a decision, you have to prepare for the positive side and the negative side, right? Now, it depends entirely on where Burkina Faso is right now, geopolitically, from an economic standpoint. Are they really sovereign? Because if you are not really sovereign, you can't take this type of decision. If you are those type of country that continue to borrow money every time you pull up to somewhere, the next thing you say is that you're a poor country and you need people to borrow you money, right? You can't take this type of decision. So let's break down the benefits and the downside of this type of decision that Burkina Faso have just taken. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a quality operator. Say no more. Now, sovereignty is one of the biggest figures. Now, each expulsion reinforced the Traoré's government core political narrative that Burkina Faso will no longer accept external lecture on its internal affairs. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a type of mission. Let me call it a mission. It's not a narrative that is currently revolving around the AES states. You see what Burkina Faso just did? Niger will do, Mali will do. Mali is known to always do this type of thing without even thinking twice. Niger, oh man, they call it law of reciprocity. All right? So they are making this type of statement to impose their will on the global geopolitical landscape. Now, the second thing is diplomatic realignment. You see, when you expel the European Union diplomat, you are sending a statement. You are sending a message. You are telling them that we don't need you. Now, the billion-dollar question is, does Burkina Faso really need the European Union, ladies and gentlemen? Does Africa needs the European Union? What is the relevance of the European Union? All right? Now, this move did not happen in a vacuum, because the Alliance of Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is actively depending on ties with other superpowers. The multipolar bloc, Russia, China, Turkey. Let me just say Russia, China, because what they're doing with Turkey, I think is a business that anybody can do. We've seen the Barakti Akinci drone with some rebels that can afford it. So I would say it's a business type of relationship. But with Russia and China, they have economic leverage with China. They have military leverage with Russia. Not because they are not handling their own affairs. We don't have Russian fighters on the ground fighting alongside Burkinabe forces. What we have is different type of tactical squad in Burkina Faso handling security issue by themselves. But when it comes to foreign intelligence, that's where the SVR come in. So this is a sort of diplomatic realignment. Burkina Faso is saying we are not just consolidating our relationship with the multipolar bloc, the BRICS. We are telling you that your presence is becoming increasingly irrelevant. That is what the statement means. And when you look at the way Burkina Faso carried out all the actions they've carried out so far, Burkina Faso showed a lot of respect and education. They were very methodic. They called on the European Union representative and they asked questions. Investigations followed. They did not just say leave. They made necessary consultation. Give us the evidence that, show us the premise that back setting resolution, the conclusion for this resolution, that you all voted to support this motion. Where are the evidences? They could not provide the evidence. So you are trying to blackmail us on the international scene. Now get out. This is what it simply means. So now that is just another standpoint. The expulsion of the European Union diplomat clears the field for this realignment. Europe is out, other partners are in, because the world does not revolve around Europe. That is the message. The world does not revolve around European Union. That is the message. So now, the third thing, Burkina Faso declaring the European Union persona non grata is one of the sharpest tools the state has. All right? They call it diplomatic severance. It sends an unambiguous message to Brussels. The relationship must be renegotiated on Ouagadougou's terms. Not on your terms at all, but Ouagadougou's terms. So if we say non-interference in state affairs, now the European Union will now have to come to the negotiating table. That is if Burkina Faso wants to listen, which I think. And now they will now have to pledge that they will never have anything to do with state affairs. Out of Africa, we are seeing a country that is looking like a country. To be honest with you, when I look at everything, I think Burkina Faso looks more like a country. In Africa now, the AES bloc, that bloc looks like a real bloc. I wouldn't say they represent the whole of Africa right now. Like, they represent an identity which a lot of people always promote on PowerPoint and on paper, but they don't have enough cojones to step out and do it. But Burkina Faso is showing you how to do it. So before you can make this type of move, you have to say no to corruption, which I don't think is something that many states across the continent of Africa can afford to do, because they are too hungry and they are too corrupt to make certain decisions. You can't have William Ruto taking this type of decision. Never, ever. I don't stand to be corrected on this statement. William Ruto can never do something like this. Now, they say, what is the cost? That's the big question I try to ask after everything. Now, the European Union is a significant, listen very carefully, the European Union is a significant development and humanitarian partner. Development and humanitarian partner. Expelling program officer, specifically the person responsible for the European Union program in Burkina Faso, could directly impact aid coordination. The question whether alternative partner will fill the gap cannot be answered. Now, let me tell you something. That is the only cost for Burkina Faso. As Burkina Faso recently, since Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been in power, has Burkina Faso asked the European Union for aid or for help? That's a question for everybody to answer. Does Burkina Faso need developmental aid? Does Mali need developmental aid from the European Union? That's a question for people to answer. And that is where the Bank of Development, right, and Industrialization in the Sahel, that's where it comes in, the BCID. And they already have a mechanism around which this bank will generate funds. So if they want to develop any infrastructure locally within Burkina Faso, this bank is going to be responsible for the funding. So Mining cooperation, exports, imports, there are little duties that goes to that bank. So any major infrastructural development within the Sahel, they don't look to external, funders. They look within. And the diaspora, there is something they call patriotic fund. People are contributing to the growth of this particular block. So, oh, thank you so much, by design. Thank you so much. So they don't need the European Union. The more the European Union try to act aggressive, the more leverage they lose. And that is what we're seeing on the ground here. So Burkina Faso is making that statement loud and clear that the European Union have outlived her own relevance. That aside, because when you talk about humanitarian aid, they don't need it. We've seen it clearly that they don't need it. When it comes to development, they don't need to depend on them. And a lot of people will have been asking one question. They said, now that France, and I said I will address it, but let me just touch upon it right now. Said now that Burkina Faso has broken all diplomatic ties with France, now how will Burkina Faso print their currency? Since all the currency and every other person that spends the CFA franc, they go to Chalamer in France to print their currency. All right? When you look at all the factors that make sure that all these Francophone countries travel to France to print their banknotes, there is none of these criteria that cannot be ensured within Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger. Now, the thing is this. Up until the time that Burkina Faso will declare whatever direction they want to move with their currency, this is what they are doing, and this is what they have to do. Whatever currency they have in the circulation, they will manage it. It's a recycle. It's a closed system. You spend it, it goes to the bank, it comes back. It's a system. But handling of the currency is very, very critical. You don't malhandle the currency. Because it is when so many currencies are bad, that's why the country might need to, recycle or print another currency. So Burkina Faso can really take a lot of measure to make sure that whatever they have within circulation can be properly circulated. And that is within Burkina Faso. That is the control of the internal economy. Because a lot of people are making it look like, okay, they broke diplomatic ties with France. How are they going to be able to get the CFA franc? They don't need to get the CFA franc till they get their own currency. And secondly, if they want to deal with international partners, are you not seeing the capabilities that is entering Burkina Faso? You saw, if you watched the video in Kuru yesterday, you saw so much infrastructure that Burkina Faso brought into that region. It is because now, first of all, they have so many production companies that can independently produce this thing. They don't procure most of what they need from outside. And the ones they need, they have reliable partners they can deal with. And how do they pay? Ladies and gentlemen, that is where gold come in. Are we communicating? They don't need hate. European Union cannot retaliate, but Burkina Faso can retaliate. They have the leverage of retaliation. So right now, as we speak, the European Union, this is what they have to deal with, and we'll be looking at the developments in the coming days. The network actually buffered, so I think this is the information we have for you. So we'll see how everything process in the coming days, what will Burkina Faso do, what the European Union will do. We'll be waiting and we'll be watching. So the only factor, the only argument we can put in place here is that how will they get aid? How will they get funding? How will they get support from the European Union? That is the question that a lot of people have been asking, because that is the only thing that Africans have always been subjected to. Because when you misbehave to certain countries, people are going to ask you, how are you going to get support? So, ladies and gentlemen, the billion-dollar question is right there. How is Burkina Faso going to get support? Do they need the European Union support? If you can answer the question, definitely you've already solved the entire problem. So this is the information we have right now today. And this is a very, very great move by Burkina Faso. Now, this is the play. This is the same playbook that everybody has been talking about. Burkina Faso under Traore is not asking for permission from anybody. You've seen what they did with France. If anybody wants it, they can get it. That is the time that Burkina Faso is on right now. Burkina Faso is not very, very hostile against anybody. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has said this a couple times that if you want to relate to Burkina Faso, Burkina Faso is ready to relate with you. But if you move a certain way, like interfere in state affairs, definitely we are going to move in a certain way that you might not like. It doesn't mean that Burkina Faso does not like the whole construct of Europe, but Burkina Faso is not against any European citizen. No, Burkina Faso is against people coming to the states to meddle in state affairs. Do your consular service, mind your business, and everybody will be fine. But when the European Union representative failed to do this, then we have the result we have on ground right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the current development we have in Burkina Faso, and I said I should bring this information to you. What do you think? I want to thank everybody that have contributed on this live stream. By Design, thank you for your donation. You've been a very, very strong supporter of the Android community, and want to say thank you for this support. Then, the other brother or sister, the gender is not always obvious. We really, really want to appreciate you for the donation you put in. We appreciate it. Now, everybody that joined the live stream and everybody that did well to hit the like button, we really, really want to appreciate you too. You've been solidly, you've been very, very solid behind us. And the situation in Mali, ladies and gentlemen, the type of situation, the one I talked about, where the Malian armed forces were ambushed, we are trying to reinforce this public opinion that is beginning to grow some uh, strength and some traction. That it is very, very important that the Malians beginning to, they should start looking in the direction of the volunteer defense persons. And I think the Malian people can really, really perform when it comes to this. A lot of people they are saying that Mali does not need a VDP because of the climate and all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is my personal opinion. I have seen some Malian top bloggers like Ibusi beg their government that they need the VDP. All right? You need the VDP, not because you need them to fight for you. You need intelligence. You need surveillance. The drones cannot be everywhere. Mali is big. Families, Mali is bigger than Nigeria. The total surface area of Nigeria is like half of Mali. And when you look at those UAVs, the entire Malian Air Force, I think they might have up to 30 aircraft of different variation. Do you think they can cover the entire territory of Mali? So this is where people come in. You need them. It is not to give props to some people. No, it is to call for something that needs to be done. All right? So thank you, and God bless you.